Breakthroughs usually arise in the intersections between different fields, and within the intersection of biology and computer science is the fascinating realm of amorphous computing. Amorphous computing is an abstract, interdisciplinary model that radically transforms the foundations of computer science to reflect the behavior of biological systems. So, what is an amorphous computer? Formally stated, it's a massively parallel network of minuscule, discrete, identical, asynchronous, locally interacting processing units, or as I like to say, a blob of cells. Let's look at this definition a little more closely. This is Steve. Steve can send and receive short messages, but he can only interact with his immediate neighbors. When Steve receives a message, he might retrieve or modify some data in his memory, change his color, and possibly send a new message to his neighbors. The way Steve responds to stimuli is completely dictated by a predetermined algorithm, hardwired into his DNA, as it were. And since he's so tiny, his memory and processing power are very limited. In other words, Steve is a simple-minded little fellow. But Steve's not alone, because all of the cells in an amorphous computer are programmed with the same simple instructions. However, despite their individual limitations, with enough cells and the right programming, the whole blob can work together to perform global computations. To see these ideas in action, let's design our first amorphous program. Here's how it works. If a cell receives a message telling it to turn a certain color, then it will compare it to its current shade. If they're the same, it'll just ignore the message, but if they're different, then it'll change its color and pass the message on to all of its neighbors. Our code is almost done, but since the cells process asynchronously, they might receive different messages at the same time. Let's resolve mixed signals based on local popularity. That means that if Steve gets both blue and yellow messages, he'll pick the one that's more common among his neighbors. Now, let's run this program and see what happens. To get things started, let's tell Steve to turn blue. Steve changes his color and tells his neighbors, then they turn blue and tell their neighbors, and so on. Essentially, we've written a program that propagates waves of color. But now, when two different signals interact, we see spirals. Is that what you were expecting? It certainly surprised me the first time I tried it. I mean, there's nothing spirally about Steve's program, and yet somehow the spirals showed up anyway. It seems a little like magic, but that's not what's going on here. The spirals were just a natural consequence of the way the cells interacted. I'll leave you with the challenge of figuring out why, but the crucial point is that the code at the cell level looks completely different than the behavior at the blob level. The idea of complex systems resulting from simple rules is called emergence, and it shows up in all sorts of fields like computer science, chemistry, economics, and physics, but nowhere is it more pronounced than in biology. I mean, think about it. In a sense, you are a living, walking, breathing, amorphous computer. You're a giant blob of trillions of tiny, asynchronous, locally interacting cells that are all programmed with the same DNA. While we have yet to master emergence at the biological scale, researchers have designed amorphous programs that can construct paths, simulate microbe colonies, grow shapes, and even calculate global coordinate systems. As the field continues to advance, we'll soon have amorphous compilers, amorphous operating systems, amorphous networks, amorphous Pong. And the cool thing about amorphous computers is that they're hardware agnostic, meaning that you could make them out of digital microprocessors or biological cells or something else. And each of these physical implementations will have different specifics for how the cells communicate and process information. But no matter what they're made of, all amorphous computers pose the same central challenge: engineering emergence. Building simple low-level programs that produce complex high-level results. And it turns out that's pretty hard to do. So why bother? I mean, no offense to Steve here, but what can we do with amorphous computers that we can't already do with ordinary digital computers? Well, one idea is to mix amorphous cells into smart paints and fabrics that can react to their surroundings. Another idea is to design intelligent swarms of tiny nanobots that work together to explore their environments. And compared to digital computers, amorphous computers more closely mimic the way that neurons interact, so they may help us better understand how collections of cells can produce thoughts, emotions, memories, and even consciousness, which may in turn contribute to the development of an artificial intelligence. It might sound like science fiction, but it's closer than ever to becoming a reality. Improvements in nanofabrication are opening the door to the manufacture of molecular machines, and the tools of synthetic biology are making it easier than ever to hack the genetic code and design custom organisms. The future of amorphous computing is fittingly very amorphous. But one thing's for sure, it will forever change our outlook on computer science and biology. You've got to hand it to him. For such a little guy, Steve is part of a big scientific revolution.